Good evening, Mr. Voss. We're here to change your locks. That's our HOA president, Margie, straight into my doorbell camera smile, laminated clipboard tucked like a scepter. 10 hours earlier, someone stapled a neon notice to my gate. Here's how a staple turned into a standoff. The paper was the color of a traffic cone, and it was stapled dead center to my wooden gate. Remove my gate for community access. The words looked like they'd been shouted in ink. Steam curled from my mug and vanished into the cold as I stood there reading it twice, then a third time as if repetition might make it sane. A trash truck beeped at the end of the cul-de-sac, backing up like a metronome for bad news. Frost silvered the lawns. In the margin of the notice below, a block of legalese, someone had penned a name in a bossy flourish, Margie. Our HOA president loved signatures that looked like crowns. I pulled the paper free, careful not to rip it, and slid the cold staple out with my thumbnail. It bent like a tiny fish hook. I carried the notice through the side gate across the pebbled walk and into the garage. On the metal shelf by the tool chest sat my father's walnut gavel, the one he used when he clerked at the county courthouse. I laid the notice beside it, and the orange made the wood look darker, steadier, as if the gavel were absorbing the heat. There was a smell of motor oil and last winter's lawn seed. I thumbed my phone awake and called the HOA office before my nerve cooled. HOA, Ridgewater. "This is Candace," a voice said, smooth as laminate. "Hi, I'm Calder Voss on Turn Court. I just found a notice stapled to my gate, okay?" Typing, clicked. "Address." I gave it. "Yes, you're in the system," she said. "The gate violates new access guidelines." "What guidelines? I have a city permit from 2019. It's in the file at Planning and Zoning." "The board adopted an update," she replied. "We're prioritizing community access to shared walkways." "This isn't a shared walkway," I said. "It's my side gate. It opens to my backyard. Still, it obstructs continuity." "Continuity of what?" "My privacy." A pause. "Sir, I'm just reading the policy." "Then read me the part where you can order me to remove my gate. I can email the notice," she said. "Compliance is expected within 48 hours. And if I don't," there was a click of nails on desk, a new page turned. "Fines escalate daily until cured." "Cured," I repeated, "like a ham." Another pause. "Is there anything else who signed the notice?" "President Margie Pennick?" Of course she did. The line went quiet except for the HVAC hiss on her end. "You'll receive the email shortly," she said, and then she was gone. I set the phone down on the bench and looked at the gavel. Dad used to say, "Don't shout, show the paper." Paper won arguments if you knew which paper. The notice in my hand crackled when I flattened it against the workbench. The heading used a font that pretended to be serious. The body said, "Remove my gate." Then a paragraph on community access that spoke vaguely about linkages and common thoroughfare aesthetic. It might as well have said, "Because we feel like it." Bootsteps approached on the sidewalk. Sarai from across the street appeared in the gap of the garage door. Breath fogging. Calder. "Is it true?" she asked. "They're making you take it down." "They stapled a love letter to it," I said, lifting the paper. Sarai winced. "They told me parents can't park before 9 for lessons anymore." "Quiet hours," Margie said. "Half of them canceled this week." "Sorry," I said. It came out both apology and promise. "Can you believe this community access to my yard?" She hugged herself against the cold. She's been circling. Clipboard and everything. I think she likes the sound it makes when the pen clicks. I laughed, which felt like the wrong response and the only one available. "I've got the permit," I said. "If this becomes a thing, I'll show it. Do you want me to say something at the next meeting?" "Maybe. Let me make a few calls first." I looked down at the gavel. My dad would tell me to start a folder. "Start 2, she said. She's not going to stop at one sheet of paper. Sarai headed down the driveway, scarf trailing like a flag. The trash truck hissed, exhaled, moved on. The cul-de-sac felt too quiet, like the moment before a dog starts barking at nothing. I carried the notice inside and set it on the kitchen table. The coffee had gone lukewarm. I pulled a plastic file box from the cabinet where I keep warranties and tax receipts. A tab slid into place HOA with a satisfying click. I slipped the notice in front right where I could see Margie's signature if I needed the blood pressure bump. Then I went to the office, booted up my desktop, and opened the city portal. After a few misremembered passwords and a 2-factor code that pinged my phone, I found the PDF fence and gate permit approved 06/12, 2019. I printed a copy, then another, because Dad's voice in my head said, "One for you, one for them." By the time the printer cooled, a subject line bloomed in my inbox. Notice of violation gate obstruction. I clicked. The HOA email reproduced the orange document in sterile black and white, plus a paragraph of cure steps and a compliance officer signature block that looked suspiciously like a font named after a beach. The message had an attachment, Ridgewater Access Guidelines V3. I opened it. The PDF talked about enhancing communal flow and aligning visual continuity. It mentioned shared walkways several times without a map. When I searched for lot easement, it turned up nothing. When I searched for right of entry, nothing. My permit, meanwhile, literally had a parcel number. I printed the guidelines anyway and stuck them behind the notice in the folder. If there was going to be a pile, I wanted my pile to be the tallest. Outside, the frost had melted into tiny beads on the gate rails, darkening the wood a tone. I ran a finger along a staple hole where the orange paper had been and felt a small burr. On impulse, I took a photo of the gate from 3 angles and saved them into a new album, Gate, March 2024. The phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered because that's what auditors do, we answer. "Mr. Voss?" a woman asked. "Speaking. This is Candace again. Following up. Just to confirm you received the email." I did. "Great. Please be aware of the timeline." "I'm aware," I said. "I also have a permit. From the city, which outranks a PDF with the word flow in it." She cleared her throat. "Any appeals need to be made in writing to the board." "Noted," I said. "We appreciate your cooperation." Appreciation noted, too. When I hung up, my kitchen looked like a small law library had exploded. The notice's edge curled as it dried. I pressed it flat with the gavel, and the wood left a faint semicircle on the paper, a watermark of intent. In the reflection of the window, I could see myself, mid-50s hair doing its own thing, shoulders tighter than they needed to be at 7:15 a.m. I didn't feel like a fighter. I felt like a guy who wanted to drink his coffee while the trash truck beeped away. A memory surfaced uninvited, but welcomed me in 2019, standing at a counter across from a clerk with a daisy tattoo. She said, "You're good to go, Mr. Voss," and I'd grinned like a kid because the gate wasn't just planks and hinges. It was a line I could draw and keep. I poured the rest of the coffee into the sink and turned on the hot water. Steam rose and clouded the window. Somewhere down the block, a dog finally found the nothing it had been searching for and started to bark at it. That evening, the sky went the color of an eraser before it yields. I cooked eggs I didn't want and ate them standing up. When the last dish clinked into the rack, my phone chimed. Notice of fine escalation. Daily multiplier applies until cured. The subject line included 3 exclamation points, which felt gratuitous for a community that once voted 7 months on mailbox styles. I opened the email and read the line twice, then a third time. My hand hovered over the mouse. In the living room, the heater kicked on with a hollow thump. I slid the chair back, walked to the garage, and laid the phone beside the gavel and the orange notice. The 3 of them looked like a lineup exhibit. I could almost hear my dad show the paper, then show the next one. "Okay," I said to the empty garage. "If it's paper they want." The gate outside clicked softly in the wind, as if it agreed. By mid-afternoon, the wind had turned the cul-de-sac into a whistle. My gate answered with a tired creak each time a gust found the sliver between boards. I opened my inbox, and there it was, bold as a stop sign. Notice of enforcement, lock change scheduled 48 hours. My mouth went dry. I clicked. Failure to cure the obstruction will result in lock replacement to ensure community access. "Locked out," I said to the empty kitchen, testing the words like you press a bruise. "Locked out of my own house." Before I could decide whether to laugh or swear, the doorbell chimed. I checked the camera and saw Sarai hugging a tote bag to her chest hair whipped by the wind. I opened the door. "You picked a great day for paperwork weather. I brought you muffins," she said, stepping in with a nervous smile. "I didn't know if you were eating." "Win for muffins," I said. "Loss for the rule of law." Her smile faltered. "They sent me an email this morning. Out of consideration for neighborhood quiet hours, lessons before 9 are discouraged." And then a second line, "Parking before 9 may be subject to review." Discouraged feels like a nice word for don't. 2 families canceled. "Let me see," I asked. She pulled her phone and tilted the screen. The subject line was upbeat, all title case and neighborliness. The body used phrases like community harmony and acoustic continuity. "They're going to harmonize you out of a job," I said. "Margie told me in the driveway that the board is just trying to maintain standards," Sarai said. Her voice got small. "I can't afford this, Calder. You're not the only one," I said. "They just told me they plan to change my locks in 48 hours. Locked out. She rocked back like the words shoved her. They can't. Can they? Not legally, I said. But they can make a lot of noise until someone believes them. We were still in that careful quiet when Arlo and his son Eli came up the walk. Eli maneuvered his wheels with steady hands, a superhero sticker peeling at the edge of his chair. "Hey, Calder," Arlo said, raising a folded paper. "You too. I'm collecting them," I said. "What did you get?" "A violation," he answered, passing the page. The header screamed, "Accessory structure, nonconformity," and below it, "Remove temporary ramp obstructing facade continuity within 7 days." Someone had circled facade continuity like it was a medical condition. Arlo's jaw worked. "We built that ramp so Eli can get into the house without me deadlifting him. They said it ruins the line." Eli spun his wheels an inch forward, an inch back. "Do they want a trampoline, buddy?" Arlo said softly. "It's okay," Eli added, looking at me. "I can do stairs if I have to. It hurts." He said the last word like it was a technical term. I swallowed anger I didn't know I had left. "You're not pulling that ramp," I said. "Period." Arlo's shoulders loosened a notch. "I figured you'd say that." He exhaled. "They also mentioned access." "Everyone's very interested in access," I said, "as long as it's not access to your own life." We moved to the garage where the wind couldn't edit our sentences. I laid Arlo's violation on the workbench beside Sarai's email and my orange notice. The gavel sat like a punctuation mark saying enough without sound. "Bennett's on his way," Sarai said. "He texted, he found something." "Of course he did," I said. "He collects certainty the way other people collect stamps." As if on cue, Bennett appeared at the threshold in a windbreaker that made its own weather. He tapped his tote like a magician warming up. Before anyone says anything, he announced, "I have the 2017 CCNRs and the city map of designated shared walkways, and guess what? Your side yard isn't one." He slid a dog-eared booklet across the bench. Ridgewater Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. 2017. Page corners were furred with use. Bennett had tabbed sections with neon flags. He opened to a diagram of parcels and easements, then to a page labeled Article 7, Architectural Control. "Read the definition of a common area," he said, tapping with a capped pen. I scanned. Common area shall mean all real property owned by the association for the common use and enjoyment of the owners. No mention of private side yards, no mention of retrofit lock changes, nothing about gates that open to backyards. Bennett's eyes gleamed. Also, the bylaws specify notice and a hearing before any enforcement that touches entry or use, and that access guidelines PDF they emailed. "It's not in the amendment index, so it's a fashion brochure," I said. "More like a memo that thinks it's a law," Bennett replied. "And your permit trumps it." Sarai let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "So I can teach at 7:30 again. I wouldn't post a sign," Bennett said. "But the board can't invent quiet hours for individual livelihoods without a vote. We can demand the meeting minutes and the vote roll." Arlo tapped his violation. "And the ramp." Bennett flipped to Article 9, Use Restrictions. "There's an exemption here for reasonable accommodations consistent with the ADA." "Actually, several cases," Bennett, I said, smiling. "You had me at exemption." He returned the smile, faintly triumphant. I printed the relevant pages. I also highlighted where access refers to common property, clubhouse trails, lake path. Your gate isn't any of those. "Locked out," Sarai repeated under her breath as if the phrase were a stone she was weighing. "They can't lock you out. Not if I show the paper," I said. I pulled the file box closer and slid new tabs into place. Violations, CCNR, 2017, Emails, Permit, Guidelines, V3. The clicks were small, but they felt like armor buckling on. I copied Bennett's highlighted pages and tucked the copies behind the orange notice. "Micro-library," Arlo said, nodding at the rows of plastic tabs. "Dad would tell me to make a second one," I said. "One for court, one for home." "You think it'll go that far?" Sarai asked. "I think it's already further than it should be." I looked at each of them. "But we're not alone." The wind found the seam in the garage door and slipped a cool finger through. Eli shivered. "I like your gate," he said. "When it shuts, it makes that click that sounds like the end of a sentence." "Best review I've gotten all week," I said. Sarai drew a calm breath, steadier now. "Tell me how to help." "Keep screenshots," I said. "Emails app, posts anything with timestamps. Forward me what you have." Bennett patted his tote. "I'll draft a records request. If they adopted that access update, they have to cough up minutes and ballots. Good, I said. If this is a language game, we'll get fluent. We broke for the kind of late lunch that isn't a lunch leftover muffins and a slice of cheese each. The gate creaked at the punctuation points. I felt the anger settle into something more useful, a tight wire that could hold weight. While Sarai washed her hands at the utility sink, my phone vibrated. A notification from the HOA app spilled across the screen bordered in HOA blue. Uh-oh, I said. What Arlo asked. I turned the phone so they could see. A photo of my gate filled the frame taken from the street. The caption read, "Selfish obstruction fine, doubled daily." Beneath it, a line of comments began to bloom like mold. The wind shoved the door then, and the gate outside answered with its small, stubborn click. Rain braided itself across the windshield in silver ropes, the kind that make you park under a sign even if it says 15 minutes only. The neon open over the diner door pulsed like a heartbeat reflected on wet asphalt. Inside, chrome walls hummed with a low vibration from the ventilation, and the coffee smelled like someone took the idea of courage and boiled it. A hostess waved me toward a corner booth. Quinn Hale was already there, sleeves rolled, a legal pad squared with the edge of the formica, as if straight lines could calm a crooked world. "Calder," she said, standing just enough to be polite, hand-dry, and warm. "Sit. You look like a man who has been reading PDFs." "Tragically," I said. "And postcards from the HOA." A waitress slid 2 menus toward us and poured coffee that wore a tiny oil-slick sheen. "You folks want pie later?" she asked. Her name tag said Ruth in a looping hand. "Probably sooner," I said. "Make it 2. Pecan Quinn decided not looking at the menu. Then to me, "Tell me everything from the start." I told her the orange notice stapled to my gate, the remove my gate for community access, the lock change email, the app post with my gate framed like a mugshot. She wrote as I spoke clean block letters that could be photographed straight into a brief. When I finished, she rested the pen. "Unenforceable," she said, calm, as if we were discussing weather. "A board can't invent access to private property without a recorded easement. They certainly can't change a homeowner's locks. Tell that to the PDF," I said. "I intend to." She flipped to a fresh page. "Do you have your permit?" "Printed twice," I said. "My father's voice in my head requires duplicates." "Good father." She smiled in a way that said she'd met a lot of bad PDFs and a few good fathers. "I handled a case last year where a board tried to ban solar panels retroactively. They called them glare hazards." She took a sip of coffee. "We found the state statute that said boards couldn't prohibit solar devices, only regulate placement. The board folded as soon as their lawyer read the part with the words, 'shall not.' So there's hope. There's process," she said. "And process is hope's day job." Ruth arrived with pie before my optimism could do anything foolish. The pecans were glazed like a parking lot after rain. "Any refills?" Ruth asked. "Yes, please," we said in unison, which felt like a kind omen. Quinn slid a single sheet from her folder, the kind of paper that announces itself by its weight. "Request for official records," the header read. Beneath neat lines waited for names and dates and the particular truth you wanted to corner. "This is your first lever," she said. "By statute and your governing documents, they have to produce meeting minutes notices to members' ballots for any amendments, attorney opinion letters, if they're relying on one and any adopted guidelines they think apply to your gate. We'll ask specifically for documentation showing a vote and recording for the so-called access update. And if they ignore it, we follow with a demand letter and a deadline. If they still ignore it, we ask for a court order. But half the time, the request itself shakes loose useful arrogance." "Useful arrogance," I repeated, liking the phrase. "I've seen some of that on the app." Quinn drew a small box on the legal pad and wrote "Tick-Tock" inside it. "Second lever is a special meeting. Your CCNRs allow owners to call one with a petition 20% signatures 30 if your bylaws are fussy. At the meeting, you can place 3 motions, rescind the access rule, compel records, and recall the board." I stared at the box labeled "Tick-Tock" like it was a detonator I'd been too polite to press. "A recall. On the lawn, with folding chairs. If necessary," she said. "Democracy looks good on grass." She slid the records request toward me and placed a pen on top. But first things first. The pen felt heavier than it should have. Ruth had left the checkered paper placemat crooked, and I straightened it without thinking the way you do before signing a mortgage or a condolence card. "Before you sign," Quinn said 2 rules. 1. Everything you send as a PDF and a hard copy via certified mail. Keep scans of the envelopes and the green cards. 2. Don't take the bait online. They will try to make you the noise so they can be the signal. I've already said ham to a compliance officer, I admitted. That's fine, she said. A little human is allowed. But from here on, you are the man who says, please see attached. She tapped the header. You're also the man who knows his governing documents better than the people pretending to. I signed. The pie plate shifted under my hand and the crust cracked with a small decisive sound like a tiny plank snapping into place. Ruth appeared as if summoned and whisked the signature page to the side so it didn't pick up syrup. Good signature, Quinn said. Years of warranty returns, I said. You learn to write like a stamp. She checked the form, then added a line. Please include any board correspondence referencing. Community access, continuity gate, obstruction, or quiet hours, including drafts. She underlined including drafts twice. Fishing, I asked. Casting a net, she corrected. You'd be surprised what people put in drafts and forget to delete. The rain softened against the glass. Someone 2 booths over laughed in a way that made me want to like them. I pulled my phone and found the HOA app post with my gate photo. Comments kept coming. Rules are rules. Imagine if everyone built a wall, one anonymous handle that liked to dot sentences with patriots. Don't read them, Quinn said, not looking. I wasn't going to, I lied. Screenshot them, timestamp them, and file them, she said. Then stop feeding the part of your brain that wants to clap back. Save that energy for the lawn. The lawn, I said, tasting the possibility. How fast could we call a meeting? Depends on your neighbors and your printer, she said. I'll draft the petition language tonight. You start with the people already harmed, Sarai. Arlo the nurse with the early shift. Don't sell righteousness. Sell relief. Relief I can sell, I said. I'm an auditor. We sell relief by subtraction. Quinn smiled. Then give them a simple subtraction, 3 motions, 3 votes. No speeches longer than 2 minutes. An agenda printed on paper large enough to read from the back row. Ruth reappeared with a plastic sleeve and slid my signed records request inside as carefully as if it were a photograph. Keeps the coffee off, she said. Thank you, I said, meaning it for more than the sleeve. Quinn leaned in. One more thing. They may try something performative showing up with a locksmith serving you with a lien threat not worth the paper maybe posting your name on the app. It's not about the law, it's about stagecraft. Don't flinch. I had a feeling I wasn't finished being a prop, I said. You're not a prop, she said. You're the person with the gavel. I glanced down. The gavel wasn't with me, but I could feel its weight anyway, the way you feel your wallet or your phone, you don't have to see it to know where it is. I pictured it on the shelf in my garage walnut, dark as coffee. Intact. Waiting. Quinn set a business card on the table and wrote her cell across the back. Send the certified mail tomorrow, she said, and called her. Yes. They will smear you, she said, not unkindly. Prepare for it. The neon over the door buzzed and another couple shook rain from their coats. I folded the records request into the sleeve and tucked it flat in my bag like a passport. Okay, I said. Let's give them paper. By night, the HOA app glowed like a campfire you didn't ask to sit around. At the top of the feed was my gate framed tight by someone's phone. The caption read, Community hazard, remove immediately. A red exclamation point pulsed as if it had a heartbeat. I scrolled the comments until the words blurred eyesore rules are, rules one helpful neighbor who suggested a public-spirited teardown. A rumor thread curled beneath board can lean his place by Friday. The word lean felt like a nail rolling across the table. I set the phone face down in the garage. The fluorescent over my workbench flickered twice, then held. Tools hung in rows, a small democracy of wrenches. The orange paper notice lay under my father's gavel edges flattening. I touched the handle. Walnut, smooth, steady. I took a breath like I was about to say something important and instead said nothing. The doorbell chimed. The camera app opened to a fisheye of my front porch, Margie Pennick HOA blazer, buttoned for dignity, and beside her a man in a gray work jacket holding a tin box that said Cruise, Lock, and Key. Rain speckled the concrete. Margie's clipboard sat tucked like a scepter. I hit the mic. Good evening. Mr. Voss, Margie said to the camera, all sugar with a steel aftertaste. We're here to replace your locks. You failed to cure an obstruction affecting community access. You're at my front door, I said. My gate is on the side yard, the one with my fence on my deed. She gave the camera a curved smile, the kind people practice. The board has resolved to ensure compliance. The locksmith looked up into the doorbell lens, eyes apologetic. "Evening," he said. "Name's Hector. I just go where they send me." "You don't have to go where they don't own," I said. Margie lifted her clipboard. "Please step aside or we'll consider you non-cooperative. I'm considering you trespassing," I said. "This is private property." She knocked an official little knock. "We would prefer to handle this amicably." "Amicably would be you leaving my lock alone," I said. "Hector, before you do anything, please confirm who owns this house." He shifted his weight. "Sir, I can't." "You can," I said. "Who owns it?" He glanced at Margie. She didn't blink. Hector cleared his throat. "You do, sir," he said finally. "You own it." "Thank you," I said. Margie's smile flattened. "We'll add refusal to cooperate to your file. Add the word video while you're at it," I said. I angled the phone so the porch light flared then back. "This is being recorded." Her eyes flicked to the lens. "We have our own records. I look forward to those," I said. Hector set his toolbox down, then picked it back up. "Ma'am," he said softly to Margie without a court order or the owner's consent, "I can't change residential locks. Liability." "Fine." She snapped the first sound she'd made that wasn't laminated. "We'll proceed through formal channels." "You do that," I said. "I'll proceed by mail." She pivoted heels crisp against the concrete. The camera caught them walking down the path, Hector polite, Margie rigid rein, stippling her shoulders. The Bellevue returned to an empty porch. I let out a breath I hadn't wanted them to hear. In the garage, the fluorescent hummed louder as if it had an opinion. I set the phone beside the gavel with more force than necessary. The gavel wobbled, then steadied. I picked it up and felt the weight pull my wrist into a line. Dad used to tap once when he wanted a room to find its edges. "Enough," I said to the table and brought the gavel down. The crack wasn't loud, but it was intimate. A splinter ran like lightning from the rim into the grain. I froze. A thin thread of walnut lifted pale against the darker wood. The gavel hadn't shattered, hadn't even broken, but it had changed. I set it down as if it were a living thing and pressed the splinter flat with my thumb. "Great," I said. "Now it's me and a broken symbol." The phone buzzed again. A text from Bennett front porch need 2 minutes. I hit unlock. A minute later, he stepped into the garage hugging a paper grocery bag like a secret. Wind pushed at the door behind him and the gate outside answered with its soft click. He took in the workbench, then noticed the gavel. "You okay?" "Define okay." He opened the bag and drew out a stack of stapled printouts, edges wrinkled and faintly damp. "Recycling by the clubhouse," he said. "Someone tossed emails." "I don't normally—" "I encourage abnormal," I said. He fanned the pages. On top, a subject line, RE Access Messaging. Under Margie's name in a font that tried too hard the words, "Make an example of him." A glitter pen had underlined example with a flourish that looked suspiciously like her signature. Bennett tapped the line. There are more. Drafts, notes to the board. Quiet hours as leverage. Waiver fees, brainstorm. I read until the sentences started to make a heat under my collar. "Can I copy these?" "I brought copies," he said pleased, and handed me a second set. I already emailed the originals to myself with timestamps. "I could kiss you," I said. "I'll accept gratitude in folder form," he replied. I slid the drafts into emails behind the CC&Rs, the tabs looking like a city skyline when you squint. The fluorescent hiccuped, recovered. Outside, tires hissed on wet pavement. Another knock, not the doorbell this time, the front door itself. 3 even raps. I pulled up the camera. A courier stood there in a clear poncho envelope raised like a little white flag. "Yes," I said into the mic. "Certified letter for Calder Voss. I'll meet you." At the porch, the rain felt almost warm. I signed the handheld screen, the stylus writing my name in a way that didn't quite belong to me. The envelope was heavy, the kind of paper that thinks it earns respect by weight. Back in the garage, I slit it with a utility blade. Notice of intent to record. Lean stared back. Words like delinquent assessments and remedies available marched in bold. A due date had been circled in ballpoint. At the bottom, a notary stamp smudged like a thumbprint. Bennett leaned in. "They're bluffing," he said. "There's no assessment properly levied, and even if there were, they still owe you a hearing." "Tell that to the smudge," I said. I could hear Quinn's voice as if she were leaning over my shoulder. "Process is Hope's day job." I took a photo of the letter, scanned it with my phone, and emailed it to myself with the subject Lien Threat 06-14-2024. Then I mailed it to Quinn with a single line. "Please see attached." Bennett read the caption on the HOA app again, jaw tightening. Community hazard, he muttered. As if community means whatever they say it means this hour. I looked at the gavel at the hairline crack that the light found and followed. I thought of my father tapping the bench once, letting the room settle around the sound. "Do you have wood glue?" Bennett asked. "Yeah," I said, opening a drawer, "but I'm not fixing it tonight. Why not?" "Because I want to remember this exactly," I said. "Not worse than it is, not better." We were quiet a moment. The fluorescent finally chose a tone and stayed with it. "You're going to be fine?" Bennett said. "That's the plan," I said. "But plans don't get a vote." He squeezed my shoulder and left. The garage door sighed shut behind him. I stood alone with the notice, the drafts, the lean, the gavel. The central air knocked in the ducts like a distant judge clearing a throat. I picked up the gavel again, felt the line of the crack under my finger. It wasn't broken, it was honest. I set it down carefully as if I were pinning a map. "How far are you going to push?" I asked the room, and meant the board, and meant myself. The gate outside answered with its small click, and I couldn't tell whether it sounded like yes or no. By the time I reached the clubhouse, the air had the heavy sweetness of hot plastic. Cars lined both sides of the lane. Through the clubhouse door I saw a crush of shoulders and sun hats, people wedged into every chair. A stack of folded metal seats migrated outward as a neighbor brigade carried them onto the grass beneath a cottonwood. Cicadas buzzed like frayed wires. Quinn met me at the walkway. "Inside's at capacity," she said. "So we take the meeting where meetings have always worked outside." She pressed my father's gavel into my palm. The small crack along the rim caught a line of sunlight. "Still a gavel," she said. Across the threshold, Margie hovered near the bulletin board with two board members close as lapels. I heard her whisper to one, "We'll shut this circus down with fire codes." The word circus landed like a hook thrown at our ankles. Quinn murmured, "If they cite room limits, we adjourn to the lawn and reconvene. Owners present. Quorum by hand count." "Copy," I said. The gavel felt heavier than wood. A murmur rolled toward us as more neighbors stepped from minivans and hybrids. Bennett held aloft a clipboard thick with signatures. "Petition," he announced. "We're well past 20%. I climbed onto the low step by the clubhouse door. "Neighbors," I said, and the hum dimmed. We called a special meeting under Article 4, Section 2 of the bylaws. A few heads nodded. People who, like me, had started sleeping with the CC&Rs by the nightstand. The petition proposes 3 motions: rescind the community access rule as applied to private property, compel production of records, and hold a recall vote. Margie stepped forward, smile rehearsed. "Before we begin," she sang, "we have a safety issue. The room is over capacity. For everyone's welfare, we must vacate." "We agree," Quinn said pleasantly before anyone could bristle. "We'll hold the meeting outside so no one is turned away." The applause started in the back and moved forward, messy and sincere. Margie tried to speak over it. The sound of her voice frayed. "This is highly irregular." "It's highly attended," Bennett said. We poured out chairs, squeaking water bottles chattering. The cottonwood's shade turned the lawn into a green tent. I stood at a folding table with an agenda printed in letters large enough for the last row. Quinn placed a single-page script at my elbow, bullet points lean as a run sheet. I lifted the petition. "For the record," I said, "these are the signatures of the owners requesting today's special meeting." The paper rattled in the hot breeze. Motion 1 to rescind the so-called community access rule as applied to private lots. Point of order, Margie called, raising her clipboard like a hymn book. "The board has not recognized this meeting. Owners have," Quinn said, voice even. "By petition and quorum. Please proceed, Mr. Voss." I nodded. "Before a vote, testimony." I looked for Sarai and found her near the front, hands wringing a cloth handkerchief. "Sarai," I said, "would you speak?" She stepped up, cleared her throat. "I teach piano in my living room," she said. "I start at 7:30 for nurses on early shift. Last week, the HOA sent quiet hours emails to my students' parents. 2 families canceled. That's rent." She swallowed. "I'm not noisy. I'm not unneighborly. I'm trying to keep the lights on." She held up her phone. "I have the emails if anyone wants to read them." "Thank you," I said, and meant it deeply. Arlo rolled forward with Eli beside him, wheels leaving thin tracks. "They told me to remove my son's ramp," Arlo said, voice steady. "The way steady can be louder than shouting. Said it breaks facade continuity. My facade is my kid getting into his house." He held up his violation. Paper flapped. A few people hissed under their breath in a way that wasn't unkind, just human. Leora, still in scrubs, raised a hand. "I clock in at 6:30, she said. The no departures before 9 thing I was told to park outside the subdivision and walk in February. She shook her head with a tired smile. I take care of people's hearts for a living. I don't need my HOA to make mine race. Margie stepped forward. We're simply trying to maintain standards. A chorus answered her. Standards for who someone asked. Whose access asked another. Quinn leaned toward me. Call the vote on motion 1, she said softly, before the air cooks. I did. Hands rose in clusters. Ballots went down a line of volunteers and returned like paperfish in a stream. We counted in the open numbers called by pairs. Motion 1 passes. I said into the little battery-powered mic a volunteer had produced from nowhere. The lawn exhaled. Motion 2, I said. To compel records minutes, ballots, drafts, attorney letters, anything used to justify the access rule or quiet hours, including drafts. I looked at Margie when I said it, and her jaw moved as if she had bitten a seed. Point of clarification, a neighbor in sunglasses called. Will we make the records public? We'll make them available to all owners, I said. Sunlight is the HOA's best disinfectant. A laugh ran through the chairs. We voted. The tally came with a cadence, now people counting aloud with us as if the numbers were a song. Motion 2 passed by a river of hands. As I lifted the third sheet, Margie tried once more. This is illegitimate, she said tightly. The board sets the agenda. Not the owners who fund the board. Bennett called back. It wasn't a heckle so much as an equation. I swallowed, tasting cottonwood fluff and adrenaline. Quinn's finger touched the edge of the cracked gavel. Steady, she murmured. I nodded and glanced down. The agenda's last line waited simple as a doorbell. Motion 3, recall. The cottonwood rustled. I could feel my father somewhere in the warm air tapping once for order. Before we vote, I said we'll continue testimony. I scanned the lawn. Anyone else wish to speak before we take up motion 3? A man I only knew by his running shoes stood. I leave for the airport at 5, he said. I'm not the enemy. A grandmother raised a trembling sheet of paper. I've lived here since the model home smelled like glue. We used to help each other put up fences. A teen spoke into her sleeve. My mom says we used to wave at the board. The microclimax came by accident. Margie tried to talk over a nurse describing a winter shift, but applause rose around the nurse mid-sentence, full-throated, heat-bright, unstoppable. It wasn't applause for spectacle. It was the sound a neighborhood makes when it remembers itself. Margie's words unraveled against it and fell away. I looked at Quinn. She nodded once. I lifted the gavel. The crack winked in the sun like a scar that had learned to mean something different. This meeting is official, I said, the mic popping slightly on official. By petition, by quorum, by owners present. We are proceeding under our governing documents in full view. Margins of the crowd filled in with latecomers carrying camp chairs. A kid chased a cicada. Somebody handed Leora a bottle of water. I read the last line of the agenda. Motion 3, I said. Recall of the board. I let the words hang there, audible and undeniable. Ballots will be distributed row by row, I added. We count here in plain sight. The lawn went quiet the way air goes quiet in a church before a hymn. In the back, Margie's clipboard trembled just enough to catch the light. We lined up the folding tables end to end so they made a bright, wobbly spine across the lawn. A neighbor produced a clear acrylic box, the kind you see at charity raffles, wiped it with her sleeve and set it dead center. The sun slid down toward the roofs, turning edges honey gold. Shadows from the cottonwood stretched along like careful handwriting. 2 at a time, Quinn called, holding a clipboard with volunteers' names. Take a ballot, mark it fold once, and drop it in the box. We'll count here. She looked at me and nodded, go. I stepped to the mic. Owners, please line up by street. I said, turn court first. It was a small grace to let our cul-de-sac go early. They'd been living with our drama at mailbox range. People formed a queue without jostling neighbors who had borrowed sugar and ladders, now borrowing resolve. The ballots were simple: recall, yes; no, with a blank for lot number. Pens scratched, paper folded. One by one, slips thumped softly against acrylic. The box filled like a slow aquarium. Margie paced the periphery clipboard tucked close her heels, biting little crescent moons into the lawn. She smiled at people she'd scolded last week. She encouraged a straggler to remember the good, and then pretended she hadn't. Every few steps, her eyes flicked to the clear box as if it were a candle guttering in a draft. A volunteer near me, high school senior hair in a tight bun, held a laminated sign that read, "Ballot line starts here." This is weirdly exciting, she whispered. It's supposed to be boring, I said. If we do it right next time, it will be boring. She laughed and raised the sign higher. By the time Fossil Creek picked up the late light, every street had fed the box. Quinn raised her hand. Ballot line is closed, she announced. We'll begin the count. She gestured to 2 card tables we'd pulled into the last band of shade. Each had 3 volunteers, 1 to unfold, 1 to read aloud, 1 to tally. I stood with the gavel at my side, its crack a dark wink. Read clearly, Quinn said. We call out lot numbers only to confirm eligibility, then the vote. No commentary. Lot 12. Yes, a reader called. Lot 31. Yes, the other table answered. We established a rhythm. The tally marks marched in neat bundles of 5. A hush fell that wasn't silence, it was people listening with their whole bodies. Somewhere a kid's sprinkler arced across a yard and ticked against a fence. Cicadas droned like static. Lot 45. No, someone called, and the hush accepted it the way a good ledger accepts a debit. Margie moved closer, hovering just outside the counting squares as if heat alone could smear a pencil. Are you verifying dues status? She asked brightly. We're verifying ownership, Quinn said, tone linen. Smooth. Per your bylaws, recalling a director requires a majority of votes cast by members in good standing. You've provided no list of alleged delinquencies, so ownership is our current threshold. Margie smiled in a way that suggested she had invented ownership. We counted another 20. Lot 7. Yes. Lot 9. Yes. The acrylic box emptied to a snow of folded slips on the tables. Arms moved, voices called, pencils ticked. I watched the tallies grow taller and tried not to calculate ahead. Halfway through the second table, Margie cut a diagonal toward the first. I didn't see it so much as feel the energy change a ripple moving against the crowd. She reached for the box, maybe for the last few ballots underneath, maybe for the comfort of plastic. Quinn caught her wrist with 2 fingers and a word as level as a bench. No, it wasn't loud. It was not negotiable. Margie stopped. For a moment I thought she would smile and claim she was only steadying the table. Instead, she held her position, then painted on a different expression and stepped back as if retreat were choreography. The lawn exhaled and settled again. I realized my hand had tightened around the gavel. I let it breathe and shifted my weight. Lot 26. Yes, the reader said. The tallies reached a threshold Bennett had circled on his sheet earlier. He touched the circle and showed me the math with his eyes, even if every remaining ballot were no. 2 more lots. 3. The totals crossed the line and kept going. We have it, Quinn said softly. I lifted the mic. We'll finish the count, I said. Then we'll announce the result. It felt important to model patience to teach our adrenaline to wait its turn. The last ballot made its small sound. The readers compared piles, the tally counters aligned columns, and Quinn added the numbers in a tight column, then again on a separate line, not because she didn't trust the first sum, but because this is how trust is built. She handed me the sheet. My eyes read it once, twice, 3 times like the morning I'd read the notice. Only this time, the repetition confirmed something good. I raised the gavel. Owners of Ridgewater, I said. By ballots counted in plain sight, the motion to recall the board, I felt the crack under my finger, then let the word fall passes. There was a beat of silence, a breath the size of a neighborhood, and then the sound rolled across the lawn. Gasps, first, then cheers. Then the rhythmic applause of people who hadn't planned on rhythm, but found one. A dog barked as if he understood quorum. Margie stood very still. Smile stretched thin as tape. The clip on her board clicked once, twice a metronome, with no song to serve. Effective immediately, I continued, the recalled seats are vacant. Per the bylaws, we will appoint interim directors from the floor to carry out essential functions until an election can be called. First task, I glanced at Quinn. She nodded audit. That word traveled like a spark. Heads turned. People who loved spreadsheets the way other people love gardening looked up with interest. A few neighbors I knew to be gentle by temperament started offering calculators from their bags. We will audit finances, I said, including reimbursements, contract awards, and any legal expenditures incurred on matters related to the Community Access Rule or the attempted enforcement actions. We will publish results to all owners. Who will serve, someone called. We'll take nominations now, I said, but the appointment will be formalized at a brief organizational session in 30 minutes. We'll keep everything in the open. Quinn touched my elbow. I lowered the mic. One more, she whispered. I raised the sheet and the gavel together. For transparency, I said, these are the totals. Recall, yes, 146. Recall, no, 23. The cheer that followed wasn't loud so much as wide. It filled the space between people and smoothed it. A breeze lifted the edges of the agenda and turned the page like a book. On the fringe of the lawn, Margie's allies stepped away from her one by one, gravity finding its usual directions again. Margie herself stared at the box as if it had changed shape. The sun found the acrylic and flashed a last amber note. I tapped the gavel, cracked but serviceable, once on the table. "We'll reconvene in 30 for appointments and to set the scope of the audit," I said. "Bring water. Bring shade." People began to stand and talk in clusters, the first drafts of a new routine. In the corner of the lawn, a child used a folded ballot as a paper hat. It looked like a joke and also like an emblem. I stepped back from the mic and felt the weight of what we'd done settle where panic had sat for weeks. I wanted to laugh and sleep and scrub the app from my phone. Instead, I stood there a moment, hand on the gavel, and let the word audit hum through the crowd like a promise that owed receipts. We turned the clubhouse conference room into a temporary office with the mood of finals week. Desk lamps pooled gold on particle board tables. Extension cords braided underfoot. The printer hummed, then sighed, leaving the faint, sweet bitter of warm toner in the air. Outside, August heat pressed its face to the windows and fogged a little circle wherever my breath got close. Stacks of binders stood open like small black mouths. I'd labeled them with tape and a Sharpie Contracts Reimbursements Board Travel Legal Access memos and drew tidy checkboxes on the spines. Neighbors filtered in quietly the way people enter a library or a church. They took seats with the practiced care of volunteers who know they're part of a longer story now. Quinn slid into the chair beside me and set a legal pad square to the edge of the table. She tapped the top line where she'd written scope. "Authority only lasts if you maintain it with transparency," she said. "Today is about receipts." "Receipts I can deliver," I said. We began with what always tells the truth, dates and amounts. I read line items. Quinn traced them against credit card statements and reimbursement forms. Daisy, the former treasurer, sat across from us in a pale cardigan that looked like a peace offering. Her hands were neat on the table, fingers folded as if she were waiting for a hymn. A neighbor named Jay called out totals from a spreadsheet projected onto the wall. The columns were simple payee purpose policy reference documentation variants. In the corner, Bennett powered a small scanner. It purred as it ate documents and spit them back as timestamps. We tripped over the first seam almost immediately. A $1.286 reimbursement labeled Board Education Governance Seminar sat next to an airline confirmation for 2 seats to San Diego on a Friday returning Monday. The hotel receipt included a pool bar and something called a Sunset Catamaran Tour. Quinn circled policy reference with her pen. "Where's the invitation to the seminar?" Daisy cleared her throat. "We were invited through a partner group. Name I asked." She looked at the ceiling as if it might supply nouns. "I don't recall." Bennett scanned the receipts anyway. The little machine whirred impartial. We found more. A weekend in Santa Fe, coded as board retreat, a series of working lunches at a steakhouse that had a piano player on Saturdays, reimbursement for consulting paid to a landscaping company with the same last name as a former director. Each time we matched the charge against a policy line, a subtraction appeared. Numbers don't take sides, but they do keep score. I kept my voice level. "We'll need supporting documentation for all education and retreat expenses," I said. "Agenda, name tags, handouts, anything with dates and topics. For vendor payments, we'll need bids and contracts." Daisy's mouth made the shape of course, but the sound didn't come. She nodded, small and controlled. There was a bruise-forming look to her silence, the kind you get when you realize you've been carrying something too heavy without noticing the ache. Daisy Quinn said gently, "We're not here to humiliate. We're here to set a baseline." "I understand," she replied, voice thin. I should have asked more questions. We broke for water and a bowl of pretzels. The copier shuddered to a halt and blinked ADD paper with the urgency of a fire alarm. I fed it a ream and patted its plastic like it was a nervous dog. When the room settled, we turned to legal expenses. A folder labeled Access Enforcement contained invoices from the association's attorney, emails billed in 6-minute increments, a draft policy update, and a memo warning that lock changes may present significant liability. I scanned that line twice and felt a muscle in my jaw loosen. Margie hadn't just pushed, she'd pushed past legal caution signs to get to me. Midway through the afternoon, the door cracked open and a neighbor stepped in with a rolling cart of more paper. On top, someone had taped a Post-it with a smiley face and fuel, Laughter traveled around the tables like a small, sober joy. It wasn't victory, just the kind of camaraderie that makes work feel possible. The mini Cliff arrived in a neat manila envelope. Inside, an invoice marked "Paid" for a governance consultant, same address as a board member's nephew. The memo line said Strategic Communications Access Initiative. Another sheet stapled to it held a bulleted plan, position access as safety, frame dissent as obstruction. Make example early. The last line read, Consider waiver fee pathway. I felt heat at the back of my neck. Quinn only nodded slightly as if to say, There it is. Daisy's composure loosened a stitch. I thought it was above board, she said, voice smaller. He said it would help with messaging. Messaging is not governance, Quinn replied. Not unkind, just accurate. By early evening, our columns of numbers had grown like careful hedges. We'd flagged every out-of-policy charge in yellow and every absent document in pink. A small pile of envelopes sat to my right. Letters we would mail certified tomorrow. Request for supporting documentation demand for repayment. Notice of audit findings. In the lull, I pulled the gavel from my bag. The crack along the rim looked less like a wound now and more like a grain line revealed. The walnut was dull from handling. I set out a square of sandpaper and a small bottle of oil. You're going to do that here, Bennett asked, half a smile. Transparency, I said. If we're mending things, we might as well mend the thing that started it. I ran the paper along the splinter slow, and even until the raised edge gave way to smoothness. The sound was low, like someone whispering a story. I wiped the dust with a lint-free cloth and massaged oil into the wood. The walnut drank, it went darker, richer, honest. When I set the gavel back on the table, the crack was still visible, but it was no longer an accusation. It was a line in a book where you stop and underline. Quinn touched the gavel with 2 fingers, quality control for the soul. Now it belongs to you, she said. Does that mean I have to learn Robert's rules? At least the half-page version, she said, smiling. We resumed. Daisy asked for a glass of water and sat very still. After a while, she looked up and her voice came clearer. I can repay the retreats, she said. The consulting, too. I didn't know the nephew had a business. I should have recused. I'm sorry. She folded her hands again. I can write a check this week. Thank you, I said. The room did a small exhale. Accountability isn't dramatic when it's working right. It's quiet, like rain at night. We packaged the flagged documents into an audit packet with a cover sheet. Bennett printed a summary totals by category variance amounts requested documentation list. The printer squeaked as it spit out the last page. I initialed the bottom and dated it. Quinn added a footer for distribution to owner's summary of preliminary findings. We ended as the light did. Lamps threw clean circles on the tables. The room smelled like paper and effort. Quinn stood and rolled her shoulders. You did good work today, she said. We did, I said, and surprised myself by believing the plural. On the way out, I checked our temporary mailbox rack near the door, a row of labeled trays for owner's correspondence. In the community tray sat a stack of postcards printed on glossy stock. The front showed Fossil Creek water dimpled with evening wind. On the back, neighborhood BBQ. Saturday 5 p.m. Bring a dish. Bring a chair. Bring a story. I held one up to the light and felt my chest loosen the way a knot gets talked out of a rope. Looks like we're cooking, I said. Quinn took a card, read it, and nodded. Transparency tastes better with smoke. We flipped off lamps one by one until only the exit sign glowed. I slipped the restored gavel into my bag and locked the door behind us. Outside, the clubhouse bricks radiated a day's worth of sun into the softer air. Somewhere near the lake, a grill lid clanged as someone tested the hinge. On the walk to the car, Bennett caught up. I'll post the audit summary in the morning, he said, and the invite. Good, I said. Let people see exactly what we saw. He looked at my bag. And bring that on Saturday, he added, meaning the gavel. Symbols help, especially when they're honest, I said. In the rear view, the clubhouse windows went black, then became mirrors. A few moths navigated the glass like tiny paper boats. I drove home slowly with the windows down, the night warm on my arm, the tonic of copied pages and checked boxes still humming like a good engine, quiet, steady, built to last. Dawn came in a thin blue sheet and slid over the fence like a promise. I thumbed the latch and swung my reinforced steel gate open. The hinges, newly greased, moved without a word. Bars caught the first edge of light and threw it back in narrow stripes across the driveway. I eased the truck forward, the tires whispering on concrete, and felt the simple relief of leaving my own home through a gate that was finally no one's business but mine. The street was quiet sprinklers ticking in staggered applause. I pulled to the curb and looked back. The steel held its line clean welds powder coat even the geometry of a boundary that didn't apologize for itself. A jay hopped along the top railhead, cocked as if checking our work. The gate clicked closed with a sound that to me had come to mean enough. By late afternoon, Fossil Creek had the mood of a postcard you keep on the fridge. Smoke from a half-dozen grills drifted over the water and curled around the cottonwoods. Someone had strung pennant flags between two folding canopies. They made a soft zipper sound when the breeze moved. Kids slung frisbees with the solemn intensity of small pilots. Laughter traveled in loose bursts. I parked and carried a tray of corn to a table already crowded with potato salad and a heroic pan of baked beans. Quinn waved from under the shade canopy. "You brought the good kind," she said, thumbing a kernel. "Not the ones that taste like disappointment." "Only the finest," I said, and set the tray down. From my bag I took the Gavel walnut, dark, as cooled coffee settled it on the picnic table and felt the wood meet the wood. Prop Pusher 3 repaired honest. Bennett arrived with a stack of stapled pages, eyes bright. "We have checks," he announced. "Real checks. Not promises disguised as fonts." He fanned them like a winning hand. Daisy dropped off her repayment this morning. 2 board members reimbursed travel, and he lifted a final sheet. "Interim board resolution committing to publish monthly financials." A cluster leaned in. Totals, someone asked. "Refunds to the operating account just over $8,000, Bennett said. "Consultant invoice canceled. Legal spend capped without owner vote." He pointed to a paragraph. "And this, A, commitment to any future policy being adopted only after notice, an open meeting, and a recorded vote." Quinn smiled, not triumph exactly, but the kind of satisfaction that sits well on a person who prefers verbs to adjectives. "Transparency keeps," she said. "Like jam." Sarai set a casserole on the table and hugged me the way a piano teacher hugs, careful of elbows all heart. "I have students at 7:30 again," she said. "Parents came back after the summary went out. They said the emails read different once they saw the numbers. That's the trick, I said. Make the numbers louder than the rumors." Arlo wheeled Eli over paper plate on his lap. Eli raised a hot dog in salute. "The ramp got a coat of blue," he said. "Dad let me pick the color. ADA, approved sky," Arlo added, grinning. "No one's questioned it since the findings posted." We drifted to the grills. Leora in Scrub's clean pair barbecue-proof flipped chicken with surgical precision. "I'll say this," she murmured, handing me tongs. "Victory tastes like smoke and store-bought coleslaw, and I am not complaining." Across the lawn, the interim board had set up a card table with a hand-lettered sign, Audit, Summary, and Q&A. People stopped by, pointed at charts, asked questions, nodded. There were no speeches, just clean answers. A neighbor, who'd kept to himself for years, volunteered to help with landscaping bids. Another, an accounting teacher, offered to run a budgeting workshop in the clubhouse. Governance as potluck. Speech, someone called in my direction, good-natured, half-mocking. Speech Calder. I glanced at Quinn. She raised an eyebrow. "Keep it short." I stepped onto the low timber border where the grass met the path. "I don't have a speech," I said. "I have 3 words. Thank you receipts." Laughter, then clapping. Also, I added, I reinforced my gate with steel, not because I had to, but because I could, and because now it means something. I lifted the gavel and let the light touch the mended line. This used to belong to my father's bench. Then it broke on my workbench. Now it belongs to all of us when we need to say enough and mean it in a way that gets written down. I set the gavel back on the table. The applause this time was gentler, made of palms and smiles. At the edge of the lawn near the path that led toward the clubhouse I noticed Margie. No clipboard, no heels. She stood partly behind a tree as if the bark could argue for her. For a second our eyes met. Something like relief flickered there, unexpected as a moth in daylight, and then she looked away. I didn't wave. I didn't need to. Bennett clinked a plastic cup with a fork. "Before we eat everything, 2 quick notes," he said. "First, refunds have been posted to the ledger." He raised the stapled pages and the reconciled bank balance is printed on the back. Second, the board voted to dissolve the so-called access guidelines in their entirety. That PDF has been escorted to the recycle bin. Cheers. Someone whistled. A dog barked approval. Quinn leaned toward me. "You did what you came to do," she said. "Now you have to do the boring part." "Maintenance," I said. "Exactly," she replied. "The part that makes this last." Sun slid lower. The lake traded silver for gold. People began to sit camp chairs marking little countries' blankets stitched into a new map. I walked to the water with my plate and let the breeze cool the back of my neck. The steel bars of my gate flashed in my mind as if the lake were reflecting them from miles away. Sarai joined me balancing a cup and a fork. "Do you ever think about how small things start big ones?" she asked. "A staple, a sentence, a click on a gate." "I do now," I said. Eli rolled up brakes, squeaking. "Dad says we locked them out. He told me matter of fact. Not like a door, like the bad ideas." "That's exactly right," I said. Behind us, someone called kids to line up for ice cream. The line formed a perfect, crooked snake. A neighbor tried to set out candles and the wind blew them out, which seemed like the right metaphor for once. I carried the gavel back to the table and set it where anyone could touch it. People did briefly fingertips on wood, a little transfer of oil and intention. Symbols work when they're handled. "Say the line," Bennett said, nudging me, a grin tucked at the corner of his mouth. "What line?" "The one you said on the lawn before the vote. The one that made Leora clap first." I looked at the gavel, then at the people who had brought folding chairs and receipts and the kind of patience that can pass for courage. I kept my voice low, not to be shy, but to make the words invite people closer. "Sometimes a gate isn't just wood and steel," I said. "It's where we draw the line." Silence held for half a beat, the good kind, and then the sound returned. Skewers turned kids negotiated trades. Someone argued kindly with a potato salad. The ordinary had come back and brought its chair. As the sky went the color of a worn-out ticket stub, I gathered plates. On the far shore, porch lights blinked on. The last of the sun threaded the lake and laid a stripe like a path no one had to take but everyone could admire. I watched the glint ride the small ripples and thought of the early morning of the steel catching light and keeping it. The peace that followed wasn't heroic, it was earned. It looked like neighbors talking about gutters and school buses like Quinn reminding me to water the lawn, and not the comments like Bennett promising to send the reconciled balance before bed because he couldn't help himself. When I finally shouldered my bag, the gavel sat burnished in the center of the table. I left it there on purpose. Someone else might need to feel its weight. I walked toward the parking lot, the path lit by solar caps on the posts, and glanced back at the lake once more. The sun's last spark caught on an invisible line between water and air and winked out. I imagined my steel gate at home catching the same light and holding it for a heartbeat longer, as if to say, "We're good here." The lake still carried the scent of smoke long after the grills went cold and sunlight lingered on the polished grain of my restored gavel resting at the picnic table. What began with a notice on my gate ended with neighbors gathered in plain view choosing transparency over control. In repairing the gavel I inherited, I realized the same patience could mend a community when truth is counted out loud. Boundaries matter sometimes, they're steel, sometimes they're trust, but they only last when people guard them together. Justice isn't loud, it's steady.